guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to discuss a poem by Edwin Arlington, which is called Miniver Cheevy. Now, as you might or might not know, I'm a huge fan of antiques. Uh, I love the thought of golden age thinking. So this is a poem pretty much similar in theme, written somewhere around in early 1900s. We should remember that Edwin Arlington Robinson is an American poet. So we see in his themes is basically around the golden age thinking, right? So we see Miniver Cheevy, his character, which is sort of a self-parody, which he himself was in a way Miniver Cheevy, and this poem has had a chief importance in my life because in some ways or in most ways I pretty much feel like Miniver Cheevy sometimes. So yes, that is the reason why I wanted to talk about Miniver Cheevy. So what is the poem, right? What is the poem? Like I said, the theme is about the golden age thinking. Now, as I said, let's make a note that Edwin Arlington Robinson is an American poet. So when we talk about golden age thinking, we are talking about displacement in time, which makes it feels like, an earlier time was in a way much more fantastical in ways, and which was much more sort of connected to your soul than the present era. So considering that Miniver Cheevy, right, is sort of like wanting the knighthood back, wanting to go back into time where there was chivalry and stuff like that. So when we take into account that he's an American poet, he's talking not only about a displacement in time but also displacement in place, because American, the New World advent, by the time it had happened in the 16th century, the knighthood was pretty much non-present. The only knighthood that you got was honorary ones, and not the original one where you would get called sir for it, for doing all of those chivalry acts. So Miniver Cheevy is a person who is lost in a previous era. So he feels this sort of discontentment towards his present age. So basically he feels out of place in time and in place. So let's go see what the poem is all about. Miniver Cheevy, child of scorn. Now here is something that I want to mention. When he says Miniver Cheevy, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the season, he wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. Here I want to mention a couple of things. There are multiple characters who run parallelly with this kind of thought, and I will just a second, I'll get back to you. So the parallel that I was talking about was Don Quixote. Don Quixote is also this, around a similar. He's going through a similar feeling. He's going through a similar discontentment, where he thinks that all the novels that he's read, all the things that he's read about the past, about the chivalry past where he lived, makes him think and makes him want to go back to that time and want to act as if though he was in that time. So he does, there is a certain character, parallels between them, Miniver Cheevy and Don Quixote. I mean, think about all of this chivalry acts and these knights and stuff. I think that generally when you have this imagination, these visions, I think I would go back to Gustave Doré's illustrations, which I think is beautiful reference to the way you would think of an earlier era, especially the knight era, right? And it's been depicted very beautifully. And apart from that, I think there is this another whole sect of it, which goes with I guess William Morris, who also thought he was sort of like the discontentment with the present age, where he wanted to get handmade goods being made again, which I guess he failed very pathetically, but there is that thinking that, like, an earlier age made better art, made better furniture, made better fabrics, right? So William Morris is one of those people, and it goes with the whole arts and crafts movement. Apart from that, a similar running society, which was the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, right? Like Everett Millius or Edward John Burns, they were all they all had this idea of something from the past that they wanted to get back to the present. Like we'll see with pre-Raphaelite Brotherhoods, they depict some of Keats, Shakespeare, Tennyson, and there are a lot of depictions of night, and generally the stuff that you would see in a novel or in a poem. So they keep depicting things from the past and wanted to rejuvenate that passion back into the present age. So there is that discontentment going on with it. So again, to a little bit, a bit of, I guess, assertion has to be made on like child of scorn. Like I think that it's a very important line. Child of scorn. Discontentment with the present age. I think there is another parallel that I want to run with this similar thing is comes up in Franny and Zoe, where Franny is talking about like section men and like and Lane who's kind of arguing with her that you have some of the best poets in your university. What are you talking about? I think I would like to read a couple of lines which makes that very obvious. Lane says, I mean, hell, there are incompetent people in all walks of life. I mean, that's basics. Let's drop the goddamn section men for a minute. Now here, he again wants to say that you've got the best men in the country for your goddamn English department. And then Franny goes on to say that they're not. That's partly what's so awful. I mean, they're not real poets. They're just people that write poems and that gets published and anthologized all over the place. But they're not poets. I think the scorn of the present age, right? Franny kind of sort of sums it up in this line, that saying that these people are not poets. These just are people who write poetry. They're not actually poets. So you see there is a certain discontentment with the things going on around, which we'll see again in Miniver Cheevy. Miniver loved the days of old, when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The visions of a warrior bold would set him dancing. So yeah, so him imagining of a previous era or of a age that has passed gets him excited about life. But we'll get to his present age. Miniver sighed for what was not seen, and dreamed and rested from his labours. So basically, Miniver Cheevy is one of those people who, except for Don Quixote, who actually acts upon his fantasies, Miniver Cheevy is someone who will just dream about it, will just think about it, how he's been misplaced in space and time, how he can never get those things back. So he is basically in a very particular situations, particular circumstances he's been put into, where he feels like nothing whatever he does will ever come to any good, because the age to do good or to feel good or to think well or to make something has already been past. It's gone. It's in the past. So there's absolutely 0 point doing anything new now. So he's one of those guys. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbours. So here he's thinking about these, ancient lands. Thebes is in Egypt, and Camelot comes in UK, where King Arthur ruled, and apparently the age was very chivalrous, and there was much prosperity, there was much romance in the air. Now, I don't know much about King Arthur's reign, or if that even is real or just made up thing. But anyway, and then he goes on to say Priam's neighbours, who is the last king of Troy. So you basically have these different space, right? Different places. So he's talking about, the Troy, and then he's talking about Egypt, he's talking about the England, and he's just like, what are novels? What are these, literary pieces or poems? They're like a time machine. They take you back to a certain point. They take you to a certain place. So we can assume here that Miniver Cheevy has read about all of these things and is very much fascinated with all of this stuff. So he keeps recurring, he keeps coming back to those things where if he is okay, then this is where I feel fine. So he dreams and dreams of Thebes, of Camelot, of Priam's neighbor, where the wars were very, it had a sense of glory in it. It had a sense of chivalry. It had a sense of something very fantastical, which has been lost to time. Again, here I want to make a point that, whenever we do see, the past through novels or from historical recordings, we always see it from a specific viewpoint. And that is what causes most of the, distortion among people. That they keep thinking that this is exactly how it was and completely isolate the situation instead of seeing it as a whole. But then again, you can't see it as a whole because each and every person has been and is in a particular circumstance and cannot go beyond it to explain everything what is going on around. So when you go through a novel, when you go through a historical piece, you usually end up at a very narrow, point of view. So you can't always get everything around because imagine if you lived in the 1800s, the most basic amenities that we feel is normal now were non-existent. So if you think right now, I keep thinking about it. If I was born in some other era, I'd be fine because in a way I'm a golden age thinker myself. I love the 1920s. I love the 1960s with the Beat generation going on, 1920s with the Lost generation going on. There's Ernest Hemingway, the Fitzgeralds, Gertrude Stein, James Joyce. What's not to like about all of this, right? So when you keep thinking about all of this, and then you have the early 1800s. There's Percy Shelley, there's Mary Shelley, there's Byron, there is who is that other person? Clarinette Clermont. So you have all of these people, and then you feel like, shit, if I had just lived in that period, if I had just lived in those times, life would have been much better. So yeah, and Miniver mourned the ripe renown, right? That made so many a name fragrant. That is what I'm talking about. So you hear all these names. You hear Ernest Hemingway. You hear about the Fitzgeralds. And then you're like, shit, what a time it must have been to live in. There was Picasso, running parallelly. And what's not to like about all of this? So he says, a name so fragrant. He mourned romance. Now on the town. What does he mean by it? So he's basically saying that the romance has been sort of generalized, it has been left with no importance, just going out, right? So he says that the art even has been a vagrant, right? When he mentions art being vagrant, I guess in a way he's sort of in a way predicting the abstractedness of modern art. Right, he says a vagrant who jumps from place to place, has no, is a beggar, kind of, begging for explanations and stuff like that, which we see with current modern art. Now, very fascinatingly, Miniver Cheevy runs to Italy. Miniver loved the Medici. Albiet he had never seen one. He would have sinned incessantly could he have been one. The Medici family, one of the chief family to have flourished, to make Renaissance flourish. They spent a lot of money on art, on furniture, on architecture, basically. They were very closely associated with Michelangelo and also Leonardo da Vinci, and perhaps there is something to do with Bernini too. So he's talking about this very culturally sound, very culturally advanced era, which we call the Renaissance or the High Renaissance. So he has this thought in his head art was better, architecture was better, which I run on similar lines too. I do think similarly. I do think that the antiques were much more better designed, well designed, and much more visually appealing than what we see in the modern world today. Anyway, let's move on. Miniver cursed the commonplace and eyed a khaki suit with loathing. He missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. So you see, he is not only just thinking about the visual side of it, but also a sort of courage or the sort of thing that you would feel in an armor. There is that whole emotion that he's talking about. And then he goes on to say, Miniver scorned the gold he sought. Now here is kind of the irony, where like he's seeking it, but also at the same time, is absolutely hates it. Like, right, he's scorning the very thing he's seeking. But so annoyed was he without it. So that is what, like, even though similarly with, like, most of golden age thinkers, the same thing, like, we don't like the new money. But see, this is another topic by itself: new money and old money. We don't like the new money. Nobody likes new money. People do like new money, but what I'm saying is golden age thinkers don't like new money. They like old money, the ancient stuff, right? But yet he cannot live without it, just like, I cannot live without new money. Miniver thought and thought and thought and thought about it. Miniver Cheevy, born too late. So here we go back again. Miniver Cheevy, Miniver Cheevy, Miniver, Miniver, Miniver. It has been repeated. If I have not already discussed this, the meter and the rhyme scheme goes in A, B, A, B. So scorn and born. Seasons, reasons. Old, bold. Prancing, dancing. So it is in A, B, A, B meter. Anyway, Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver cuffed and called it fate and kept on drinking. So here we see that, like, at the end of it all, like, he does realize that it's just fate. Like, he can't do anything about, like, wanting to live in the past. He can't do anything. Except that he could act like Don Quixote did. He could. And we see this similarly with Franny and Zoe, that Franny just gives up on the whole world. She's talking about, like, she when Lane asks her, like, how's the play going on? Like, he asks, how's the play? And she says, I don't know. I'm not in it. I quit. And there is also this line where he says, do you think you're a genius or something? And then she does not answer. And then it's just like, it's a sad conversation, by the way. Anyway, I mean, Lane says, I mean, do you have to be goddamn bohemian type or dead for Christ's sake to be a real poet? Now, this again is not answered, basically. But the fact of the matter is that she scorns, like, whatever has come out of the new age, and thinks, like, everyone is sort of superfluous and is sort of a phony, which, I think, like, everyone is familiar with the word phony with J.D. Salinger. So I think there is a lot of that going on. And here is where, like, Lane goes on. No, I mean, you've been talking for half an hour as though you're the only person in the world who's got any goddamn sense, any critical ability. I mean, if some of the best critics thought this man was terrific in the play, maybe he was, maybe you're wrong. That ever occurred to you? You haven't exactly reached the ripe. And then he goes on to say, you think you're a genius, and, like, she says, Lane, please don't do that to me. Anyway, we see here that, like, Franny has absolutely lost contact with the present. She does not like her university professors. She does not like the plays. She thinks everyone is phony, egoistical. But at the same time, I think one would have to be absolutely deceived in their head to think that an age previously to ours is somehow better than what we are living through. I've suffered from it. And I think, like, after thinking, like, another parallel that runs is Woody Allen's movie Midnight in Paris, where there's the pedantic guy who keeps saying that, like, Jill Pender thinks himself as, like, someone who knows better, who would do better in a previous age, in a previous time, maybe in the Paris in 1920s. And he himself calls him Miniver. Do you think you're Miniver Cheevy? Which is funny, which is how I found out the poem in the first place. Anyway, I think at the end of the day, the pedantic guy is right. I mean, you can't live in the past. You have to move forward and always keep moving forward. There's no other way about it, right? Yeah, for a long time I thought Jill Pender was right, and after a lot of thinking, after a lot of time, I've come to realize, yeah, the golden age thinking isn't actually, it does not actually make all that sense. Because when you keep thinking about it, the the eras that have passed before us had a lot of cruelty going on for it, had a lot of inconveniences. Now we live in an age, if you want something old, if you want something that has been previously done, you could still do that. If you wanted a sword, go buy a sword. If you want, if you want to write with a pencil, go write with a pencil, right? If you want to write with a fountain pen, you could still do that. If you want to shoot analog pictures, I mean, you could still do that. You have all the convenience to do that. And to just even imagine that, somehow the ages were better, which I still keep thinking, that's the fallacy. This is the fallacy of Miniver Cheevy. That's the fallacy of Jill Pender. That's the fallacy of Franny. That's the fallacy of William Morris. All of these people, and including myself, have been deluding ourselves into thinking that somehow these ages were better than what we are living currently. Only for me to realize later that, oh my god, I'm totally wrong. I could still do the things that could have been done before. I still could. Maybe that particular society does not exist anymore. Maybe particular ideas do not exist anymore. But still, in your own surroundings, in your own circumstance, you could still bring upon those changes if you wanted to. And with that, I like to end the Miniver Cheevy, right? Edwin Arlington Robinson, a brilliant poet. I think this has been my chief interest for a very long time too. I wanted to make this video for a very long time, and I'm glad I could. So see you guys in another video. I hope you guys like the video, and I hope, if I have been wrong somewhere, you could always obviously comment upon it. Thank you for listening, guys. See you guys in another video.